Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Good day. This is Richard G. Medlock, and this is the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. Today is July 12th, 2022, and today's episode is Created Chaos. Yes, you heard me right. Created Chaos. That's what we're going to be talking about today. The views and opinions of the Medlock Post radio show are the views and opinions of the host. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. All right, let's just let that days of glory fade away there. And we will get going here today. We've gotten some good comments about Days of Glory. My wife loves it. She said that should be your theme, and I agree. But some others have kicked in and agreed and said they like it too. We were doing the Star Spangled Banner, but you got to listen to the whole thing, and you don't want to interrupt it. But we want to get going. So welcome to today. It's another beautiful day in the summertime. And again, for you climate changers, it's summertime. It's supposed to be hot. We're supposed to get violent thunderstorms in the afternoon. This is typical. Now, they're going to say, well, but what about the drought out west? Well, that's happened before. We've had droughts in the south, in the northeast, in the Midwest. It's just a big history of these things, and they're cycles, and we live through them. Let me start out. I love John Locke, Locke, and if you're not familiar with John Locke, tongue-tied here, you should look into him, read some of his stuff, his writings. The founding fathers did. They learned a lot from him about government and freedom, man's freedom, his liberties. And John Locke wrote, quote, "The natural liberty of man," get that, "the natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth and to be under the authority of no man," unquote. That was really the premise of his writings on liberty and freedom and the rights of man, and under the authority of no man. Now, granted, you know, you've heard the phrase government is something, this ugly stepchild kind of thing. We need it to enforce the laws, because not all men will follow the laws. That's been proven. So you need some form of way to stop those people from doing evil, or if they do it, then they get punished, which apparently the liberals today don't think anybody should be punished for breaking the law, even themselves. Yeah, you knew I was going to say that, didn't you? Now, another quote by Ayn Rand, and I love her. If you haven't read her, start reading her. Quote, "This country wasn't built by men who sold handouts." Let me read that again. This country wasn't built by men who sold handouts. Period. In its brilliant youth, this country showed the rest of the world what greatness was possible to man and what happiness is possible on earth, unquote. She's describing capitalism here. Capitalism. You have a producer of a good, they either sell it or somebody else sells it, and you have a consumer. They either want that product at the price being sold or they go somewhere else. Some people call it supply and demand. But capitalism is a free market of enterprise. And you're wondering why I'm talking about these things today. You will see in the main body of our discussion, created chaos is our discussion today. Episode 20, created chaos. A couple of little items I want to throw out at you. This one, Alan Dershowitz is an attorney, a constitutional attorney, teaches at law school, one of the Harvard schools or Ivy League schools, I can't remember. Great guy. He's a Democrat. But he understands the Constitution, he understands the rule of law, and he defends it. And when the Supreme Court came out with all these decisions a couple of weeks ago, he was in support of those decisions because those decisions were in line with the United States Constitution and the rule of law. And I discussed that in episodes 14 and 15. Now, he was on Greta Van Sustren's show on Newsmax last night. She has a new show on Newsmax. I didn't watch the show. I read about it this morning. He says, attorneys are turning their backs on Donald Trump. Now, that's what I talked about in episodes 14 and 15, the election coming up, and the effect that Donald Trump is having or not having, and my suggestion about what he should really do. If you haven't listened to our podcast, if you're a new listener, I would suggest going back to episode 1 and work your way forward, because I build on things like I'm doing today. It's a building block. So Alan Dershowitz is saying that attorneys in the legal field are getting what he's called Giuliani'd. Remember, Giuliani was an attorney and helped Trump, and he's basically been banned from working as an attorney. Now he's got a podcast, radio show. He's not hurting. Let's put it that way. But he says, I'm getting messages from friends that say, the word is out about you, that if there's a social event and people hear that you've been invited, they're not going to show up. They're being told that if you come walking into a restaurant, they're to get up and walk out, or tell the restaurant that, hey, if you serve him, we're never coming back. Now, this is happening to a lot of people that support Trump or support the MAGA revolution, Make America Great Again. Well, it's not a revolution, it's a movement. So you see what's happening here. Let's attack. Let's get our gangs and let's attack. Now, we're already seeing violence because of Judge Kavanaugh. He's basically getting banned everywhere. And there's a guy under arrest going to trial for trying to kill he and his family because of decisions that hadn't even been made yet or been made public. This is getting out of hand. This has created chaos. All right, so that's a little bit about what's going on in the world today. Another thing, Kimberly Strassel is a writer for the Wall Street Journal. I've heard her writings. She's straightforward, tells it like it is. She does her homework. And she wrote an article last week or so and was asking the question, why aren't people in the Biden administration being fired. And she went through and listed people like Buttigieg and others that are just doing an awful job. Look at the southern border, etc., etc. And she's asking the question, why aren't they being fired? And really come to the right conclusion. They're not being fired, Kimberly, because they're doing the job they're supposed to be doing, creating chaos, making things worse for America. That's their job. That's the Biden administration's goal, is to bring down America. That's the Democratic Socialist goal. Number one goal, destroy America. So understand this picture. And I've been painting it since June 15th and before. But I'm trying to put all these pieces together and educate everyone about what is happening in America, how we got to this point. It's been going on for over 100 years. It just didn't start with Obama or Bill Clinton or FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. It started really with Woodrow Wilson right after World War II. Well, even during World War II. Well, even before. And all this started. Progressivism is what they called it then, which was nothing but communism. All right. The main point to make today, and a quick review to get there. In episodes 14, 15, and 16, we at the Medlock Post discussed the liberal world order as the Biden administration is now expressing that thought. We introduced you to Plato's Republic, where his society would be three classes: the ruling class, the military class, and the working class. Then we discussed goals of Marxism, which are in line with Plato's concept of government or Plato's concept of communism. He's considered the father of communism in the Republic. Go read that. Yeah, you can still buy it. And to another quick review, the basic premise of Marxism or communism is, number one, to overthrow capitalism. Number two, the abolition of private property. Number three, and we talked about that in Agenda 21. Number three, the elimination of the family as a social unit. Number four, the abolition of all classes. 5, the overthrow of all governments. And number 6, the establishment of a communist order with communal ownership of property and a classless, stateless society. Wow. All right, so let's make this crystal clear. In short, the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite. Now, folks, this is crazy, but this has been going on in country after country after country. Look at Cuba, Venezuela, China, Russia, North Korea, East Germany. Look at the things that were going on. Then we introduced you to Stuart Chase, who was the Marxist economic advisor to Franklin Roosevelt, who came up with the New Deal, which was a welfare system. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is a continuing discussion to educate all of us and help us understand what has happened and is happening within the United States. So the welfare system. Now it began under Roosevelt. That great New Deal that was going to change society, that was going to help everybody. Well, we know and we have learned through government plans and programs, it's just the opposite. So, how many of you have ever heard of the Cloward-Piven Strategy? The Cloward-Piven Strategy. They titled it Orchestrating a Crisis So Government Can Solve It. Never let chaos, never let never let tragedy go to waste. Something like that. All right, so Cloward-Piven. The end goal of the Cloward-Piven strategy is the creation of a political crisis leading to a guaranteed annual income. Essentially, the Cloward-Piven strategy would lead to the complete control of citizens through socialism, communism. All right, so Francis Fox Piven was a professor of political science and sociology at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. Her late husband, Richard Cloward, was a sociologist and liberal activist and Piven's spouse. So this was husband and wife. So one was socialist and one was communist, I guess. Who knows? All right, here are the 4 steps of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Overload and break the welfare system. And that was number 1. Number 2, have chaos ensue. Create chaos. Number 3, take control in the chaos. Remember, do not let a situation go to waste. The government needs to take advantage of it, create another program. Number 4, implement socialism and communism through government force. Now, some of you are sitting there probably thinking, well, that's not going to happen in America. Folks, it already has happened in America. It's right in front of us. It's been going on since the 1940s. Their strategy to implement political crisis to achieve a guaranteed annual income was published May 2nd, 1966 in The Nation, which was a leading liberal political and cultural magazine at the time. I remember that magazine. It was it put out some ideas. I mean, the culture of the 60s, the revolution in the 60s was what brought us to where we are today. And a lot of those people that were protesting and fighting against the establishment are the ones leading the country today. And I'm putting together a program on that. See, I'm thinking ahead. I'm trying to think ahead. In this publication, their main goal to achieve the crisis was to have a massive drive to recruit the poor onto the welfare rolls. Well, that was going pretty good at that time. But at that time, welfare system was still kind of a short term for maybe half of them. You already had, by the mid-60s, the second generation on welfare. A federal program needed to be brought about to administer these large welfare programs to make sure it got carried out. This is because if it is administered locally, there would be lower enrollment because the poor are most visible and proximate in the local community, antagonism toward them has always and therefore have been intense locally than at the federal level. So basically what they were saying is, let the federal government handle it because they really don't see the problem. They're sheltered up here in their ivory tower, up here nestled in the high castle, and they really don't see what's going on in the street. They don't understand the real world, and they don't want to. They just understand power. Where locally they see it. They want to try to get rid of it. They want to try to get to these homeless and poor people to work and out of poverty. They want them paying taxes. They want property taxes from them. And if they're on the welfare rolls, that's not going to happen. The strategy also rejected that a person, you got to listen to this. The strategy also rejected that a person could overcome poverty through any institution of private enterprise, signaling that hard work, education, and personal responsibility are not a solution to poverty. Their only solution is a federal program of income redistribution to elevate the poor en masse from poverty. Total BS, folks. Total BS. It hasn't worked. They just want more and more people on it. All right. The solution of a guaranteed income to end poverty, also free from any sort of conditions, like work requirements. Remember when states and even Trump says, hey, you want welfare? There's a work requirement here. We'll help you out, but you got to go get a job. Well, under Trump, that was working real well. What was one of the first things that Biden did when he got in office? I think it was part of the 30-plus executive orders he signed day one, was no more work requirements. They say conditional benefits result in violations of civil liberties through the nation and in a pervasive oppression of the poor. Conditional benefits. Oh, you got to work, at least part-time. You got to help yourself somewhat. Okay. Now, folks, don't get me wrong here. There are people that need help. There are disabled, truly disabled people, and it's a drain on families. I promise you. There are truly disabled people that need help. They can't work. They can't do things for themselves. And they need help and support. Well, guess what? On the most part, they get shoved on the very edge of this system. Those on disabilities. They get shoved on the edge. Those that really don't need it get the big benefits. So, according to Cloward-Piven, not only are people entitled to other people's money, there can be no conditions on that. Under this logic, they are entitled to the coercive taking of others' money because they exist. I think, therefore I am. So I'm breathing, so you got to give me what you have. Cloward and Piven also stress the importance of marketing these benefits to the masses. Let's basically market poverty. This is their plan. We're not through with this. You think, man, what more can there be? Well, there's a lot. There was a lot of pieces to this puzzle. The Cloward-Piven strategy also stresses that any removal of benefits should require stringent legal review. The benefits should require administrative hearings with additional court hearings to place barriers to the removal of benefits once received. They hypothesized that lawyers could be recruited on a voluntary basis, especially under the banner of a movement to end poverty by a strategy of asserting legal rights. Enter the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. Especially under the banner of a movement to end poverty by a strategy of asserting legal rights. They already have their rights. You do not have a right to take somebody else's money or property. You go earn that. The liberal strategy calls for a climate of militancy that would overcome attitudes of being on welfare. They state that as the crisis develops, it will be important to use the mass media to inform the broader liberal community about the inefficiencies and injustices of welfare. The liberal infestation of mainstream media has occurred. So you see, they're going to tell you one thing and do another. Typical Marxism, communism, socialism, democratic socialism, progressivism, collectivism. This is where we are. This is how all of this began. It really did. Moving on. It's still a beautiful day. I love this. So more of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Their ideal political movement would be cadres of aggressive organizers from the civil rights movement and the churches, from militant low-income organizations like those formed by Saul Alinsky and other groups on the left. Remember, Barack Obama was a community organizer? This is what they did. This is what community organizers did. Saul Alinsky set up this. And as most of you probably know, Hillary Clinton was a disciple, along with Barack Obama and others on the left, of Saul Alinsky. Hillary wrote her dissertation in college, in law school, on the rules for radicals that he wrote. And it will not be made public as long as she's alive. No, because it would really tell us who she is. We know who she is. We know who Bill Clinton is. We know who Barack Obama is. Now, probably today, along with those groups, we can add the BLM, Antifa, Jane's Revenge, and others. Maybe even Planned Parenthood. Really? Think about that. Is Planned Parenthood part of the Cloward-Piven strategy to create chaos? In some ways it seems that way, doesn't it? Their plan was also ahead of the curve on implementing generational welfare dependency, because they highlight that once eligibility for basic food and rent grants is established, the drain on local resources persists indefinitely. Their target demographic was a coalition between poor whites and poor Negroes. Remember, this was written in 1966. But there's nothing wrong with saying Negroes. So they targeted, they went after poor whites, poor Negroes, and of course now they've thrown in poor Hispanics, which they're not buying into this that much. This was calculated. Let's go get all these people on welfare. They're Ultimate aim of this strategy is a new program of direct income distribution, also known throughout history as socialism, communism, which has led to the death, despair, and depravity of hundreds of millions of people. Folks, you can see all of this in today's welfare system, can't you? It's there. It's being worked. So let's review the 4 steps of the Cloward-Piven strategy. 1, overload and break the welfare system. Number 2, have chaos ensue. Number 3, take control in the chaos. Number 4, implement socialism and communism through government force. Remember we talked about the army in the liberal world order. We talked about the army, Plato's army. So the welfare system is part of that army. We're not talking military army here, not in today's world. Plato was, but here we're talking about government agencies that force these things. This is what the Supreme Court said about the EPA and other government agencies. You've overstepped your bounds. You don't have this authority. You're really pushing socialism and communism. You're forcing people to do things they don't want to do, and they shouldn't have to do. And it's costing them billions of dollars a year to keep up with these regulations. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with welfare, but that's their strategies here. Now, has this strategy worked? Let's ask some questions here. Has this strategy worked? Sadly to say, the answer is yes, and it's worked and is working very well. Let's go back to 2020, 2021, this pandemic. Welfare was elevated and escalated. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, they hand out all these checks to everybody, and then they did last year, they did the child credits. And I talked to some of my friends that had children, and all of a sudden they're getting all these checks. But these people were smart. They put all that money in the bank because all of a sudden people realized, oh, you got to pay taxes on this. So a lot of people were just going out and spending it. But probably a lot of those people don't file income tax anyway and don't pay taxes. So all of a sudden, you know, people with 3-4 kids were getting a bunch of money a month. Well, what did they spend it on? Clothes, food? Probably not. So the increase. And then what happened? They increased the welfare payments so much that people are sitting there saying, "I don't need to go back to work. This is free. Taxes aren't taken out. I can now apply and get free health insurance." Obama administration did that. If you're on welfare, you can get free health insurance. So now you've got millions of people on free health insurance under Obamacare. They're not paying a thing for it. It'd blow your mind what my wife and I pay for our insurance. It'd blow your mind on a monthly basis. All right. And think about the strategy here to overload and break the welfare system. Well, let me point you to the southern border of the United States. All these 1.5 to 2 million illegals that are coming across the border are put on government benefits, income, health care, rent. You want to break the system? They're doing an awfully good job. But you know what? We can just print more money. That's no big deal. We can just print money. This is the antithesis of capitalism. As Ayn Rand said, this country wasn't built by men selling handouts. No. This was built by hard work, labor, sweat and tears, sacrifice, and even death to get us to where we are today. And systems like this is part of taking down this country. Created chaos. Some more questions. Does being in the welfare system take away your freedoms? Do they? Do they take away your freedoms? Think about that. Does it affect your self-worth and self-esteem? Does the welfare system take people out of the capitalism system? Look, and here's an argument. They point to all these people in poverty and say, look, capitalism doesn't work. Look at all the poverty it has caused. Capitalism did not create the poverty that we're looking at in the welfare rolls. Socialism and communism did. The Cloward-Piven Strategy brought this about. Created chaos. Created chaos. So let's go to Milton Friedman, fantastic economist. And he really put this succinctly. If you haven't read his books, please read them. Study Milton Friedman. I met him once in the 70s. He was giving a speech at a university in San Francisco. I went to see him speak. He says, quote, "There is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. This is because government sets out to fix a problem with a new program. However, that program never seems to go away." Question, he asked, does this mean government never fixes a problem? Or that government will never shrink unless forced to do so by receiving less money? Unquote. History has shown us the answer to that question. Once a government program goes into place, it doesn't go anywhere. Government payrolls expand. And let me leave with a quote by the father of existentialism, Soren Kierkegaard. Quote, "There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true." True words there, folks. We see that in the world today. And that, folks, is the Medlock Post for today. May God bless America, and may God bless you. Thank you. Have a great day.